I'd like to go over some of the examples from the book so that the lecture makes a little more sense. So first thing I'm going to open up is FAQs animation. The zip file of this Chapter 8 source code is called Chapter 8 sourcecode.zip, and it is simply in your inside this element inside Blackboard. So anyway, if I click on index.html, we see a simple fade in. I'll do it again. Notice how the opacity also goes from a low level to a full clear image. And when I click on this, there's nothing yet, but it will be there in a second because we'll add it as a callback. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and minimize this and then go right into the FAQs.js. And here you see FAQs H1 animate, and it went from a very small amount to 275, and this went from 0.2, and this went from minus 175 pixels. So let's go ahead and comment this out since you've seen the animation, and it lasted over 2 seconds, and illustrate the callback. So if we look here, we're going to animate. We have all these properties comma separated. So we're going to change this, this, and this over 2 seconds, and then there's a comma here. And then we'll run this closure and say, okay, well, next, the H2 tags that have the smaller headers, the next sibling will fade that in 1 second and then fade it out in 1 second. So let's watch that in action. I'm going to go ahead and save, which I've done, and we're going to hit refresh. And here you see that. Now the fade out, fade in, and fade out. So once again, there's your initial animation, there's the closure. In and out over 1 second. So I realize that, we're just trying to demonstrate certain animations, but what's important here is that you can list properties that you can animate, and notice how they're in the curly braces, and then you have a comma, and then 2000 milliseconds, and then the closure functions. So if you keep with this, this is a nice way to stack animations and effects. Next, we'll take a look at more of the FAQs applications, and we'll look at chaining, easing, and effects. So let's take a look at the animation chaining. And in this case, we see a click event and then that explosive animation going backwards and forwards. So let's take a look at the FAQs.js, and specifically we're looking at the chaining of the semicolon here. You'll see that it has one statement and then another statement, but when we're going to comment this out, and the difference now is that we'll comment out the rest of it, but the difference now is that we have a separator that is simply the dot, so it's connected, it's animate, so we're going to animate this and then animate this. So in these examples, you have the separator being a semicolon, one where we're having the actual dots, the actual chain, and this is the similar as the first if you look with the semicolon. So I'll go ahead and delete that. But at the end, we have the closure. So let's take a look at this now. Once again, I have changed it from the semicolon to the dot. So we've gone to the chain. And now we hit refresh. We'll click. And you see the difference. So there is the larger, and then this pushes down and comes up. So that's the font size of changing and moving backwards to the top. So it goes left plus minus 275 and minus 275 over 1 second. And lastly, let's do it with a callback. So I'm going to go ahead and comment out this top. And I'm going to go ahead and move my cursor down to the bottom and eliminate this comment so we don't get an error. And in this case, we're animating the same properties, and then we just have this closure that will animate it back. So we're looking at the many different ways that we can do this. So I'm going to hit click, and you see the same effect. And again, as I said in the presentation, this is probably the most readable of the three. And next we can look at the easings and effects. Now the easings are going to be a little bit different. I'm going to go ahead and show you the source code of the HTML real quick, and you'll see there's a shiv. And if you recall, the shiv is meant to look at functionalities that aren't honored by older versions of IE and make replacements for them. So we have the jQuery min right here, and then the jQuery UI, and our FAQs.js comes at the end of it. So let's take a good look at the application here, and these are the easings, and you see it had that little bounce there. And you don't need the easings plugin, which we'll get to next week if you've seen that in any of the code around here, but you will need to declare which easing you'd like. So in this case, we have document ready. We have the H1 tag, which is the very top, and this is an example of the ease in expo and then the ease out expo. So we'll do the toggles as well so you can see them, but let's look once again at the ease in expo. We'll kill that off. And these are the easings again. So the ease in expo is that H1 tag. So click that. There's the ease in and the ease out, and that's the expo. So remember, we're controlling its left coordinate, so the left would move to the left and right, and because it's getting larger and then moving back to the smaller, that's why it appears to go down a little bit. It's really not. There's no change in the top. And this right here is the top, the toggle with the ease out bounce. So on click, we'll have the ease out bounce, and then the ease in bounce. Ease out bounce, ease in bounce. And that is a little bit about the easings. Again, pay close attention to your source code in the HTML and make sure the UI is underneath the jQuery call, and make sure your JavaScript's below. And we'll go ahead and close that out, and now we'll go to the effects. So let's take a good look at the effects first and see what we're looking at. And we're going to go ahead and click this, click that, and let's go ahead and look at the source code, and same as before. And now let's look at the JavaScript and see what's available for us. So these are all the book examples, and it's simply it's nothing more than a slide down and a slide up. However, that will be of good use for us. So it's a slow slide. And it's much more visible than if we just did display block, display none. Of course, it's going with the slide down, so 1 second's good. I recommend each time you do this, play around a little bit, see what it looks like at half a second, so it looks a little smoother. And I do a lot of work with kiosks, and with kiosks, I need to really make them fast because they're really responsive. See, that I think is a little bit better than 1 second, the half second. But this is the slide down and the slide up toggle. And the code itself is toggle the class and then slide it down, which means the next element sibling, you're going to slide that specifically down, which is the text inside. So that's a very handy block of code.